Welcome back, analysts and coaches, to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into what is honestly one of the most drastic, high-stakes tactical pivots we have seen in modern football history. Picture this. It's June 2026, and Liverpool does something completely radical. They actually sack a Premier League title-winning manager in Arne Slot and hand the keys to Anfield to Andoni Iraola. This is a guy who was managing in the Spanish second tier just 6 years ago. So today, we are doing a full scouting-style tactical audit of this massive transition. We're going to dig into the data, unpack the systems, and look at the sheer risks of reinstalling heavy metal football on Merseyside. So for those of us who study the game day in and day out, this right here is the central tactical question we have to answer. Iraola has totally proven himself as this absolute underdog mastermind. But transitioning from being a disruptive mid-table force to a proactive super club strategist, that is easily the hardest leap in football management. Can his hyper-aggressive style actually break down a stubborn, deep-sitting Premier League low block? Because we all know breaking down a set defense is the ultimate litmus test for any elite manager in this league. It's exactly what separates the top-tier tacticians who dictate the game from the disruptors who just react to it. Okay, let's dive right into this. We're going to structure our tactical audit into 6 clear phases: the paradigm shift, anatomy of the press, the low block dilemma, personnel for transition, tactical and physical risks, and finally, the verdict.
Starting off with Phase 1, the paradigm shift. It's all about rejecting orchestral play.
So Arne Slot brought this really beautiful orchestral possession-based control to Liverpool. But for the Anfield faithful, and crucially for players like Mohamed Salah, who actually came out and publicly demanded a return to intensity, it just became too predictable. The paradigm is officially shifting back to chaos. When we line up the per-90 metrics of Jurgen Klopp, Arne Slot, and Andoni Iraola, the pendulum swing is just super obvious. Iraola brings possession 1 in the final third right back up to 5.2, which is nearly matching peak Klopp. But the most staggering metric is that bottom row. Just 3.0 passes per sequence for Iraola. That is extreme directness. We are not talking about patient build-up here. This is a team that literally wants to recover the ball and punish you before your defensive shape can even blink. Moving right along to Phase 2, anatomy of Iraola's press. This is where meticulous calculation comes in. We really need to look closely at Iraola's baseline metrics from his time at Bournemouth, because it's vital to understand that this isn't just players running around recklessly. This is a highly calculated machine, 8.53. Now, for the tactical analyst out there, you know exactly what this means. This was Bournemouth's passes per defensive action, or PPDA, in the 2024-25 season. It ranked dead first in the Premier League. Iraola's teams literally do not let you breathe. They will commit fouls just to break your rhythm, and they force a crazy 29.3 danger zone losses per 90 minutes. And when they do win it back, they move at 1.95 meters per second. That's their direct speed, which, again, was the absolute fastest in the league. This sheer, raw speed in transition resulted in a staggering 147 shots from final third turnovers across 3 seasons. The instruction is so clear: win the ball and immediately play vertically, ideally hitting the number 9 while the opponent is completely out of shape. But you might be wondering, how do they avoid getting exposed at the back with all this attacking? Well, I absolutely love this quote from Iraola himself. He said, "Players do not demand freedom. They demand structure from their coaches. It is from that structure that they feel free." You know, while Iraola actually played under Marcelo Bielsa, his press is fundamentally different. Bielsa famously relied on this exhaustive, strict man-to-man pressing system that tracked guys all over the pitch. Iraola, he actually favors a zonal approach. They maintain a brilliantly compact shape, passing marking responsibilities off seamlessly. And that's exactly why, despite all this relentless aggression we just talked about, they allowed a league-low 19 fast break shots in 2024-25. So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that we have to define this system as organized chaos. We really need to dispel the myth that high-pressing, heavy metal football is just about reckless energy and passion. It's not. It requires incredibly demanding positional instructions. Every single player has to know exactly which passing lane to block, exactly when to jump, and when to drop. That's the only way this machine functions without leaking a ton of goals on the counter. All right, let's hit Phase 3, the low block dilemma. Basically, the challenge of breaking down Anfield. Now, here's the thing. When you manage a club like Bournemouth or Rayo Vallecano, big teams come out and attack you, which leaves all these beautiful, exploitable spaces behind them. But when you manage Liverpool, 19 teams are going to show up to Anfield and literally just park the bus. The spatial dynamics are fundamentally different, and this exposes a glaring flaw in Iraola's system. When his Bournemouth side had more than 55% possession, meaning they were forced to act as the proactive favorites and orchestrate through a set defense, they won just one single match out of 13. They thrived as reactive underdogs, but struggled immensely when the opponent just handed them the ball. The possession gap between these two regimes is just stark. Arne Slot's Liverpool averaged 58.6% of the ball. Iraola's Bournemouth, they sat way down at 47.5%. Look, averaging 47.5% possession at Anfield is simply not going to happen. Nor is it going to be accepted by opponents who will happily just surrender the ball and wait. Iraola has to completely re-engineer his attacking patterns if he wants to break down these deep, stubborn defenses. Which brings us to phase 4, personnel for the transition. Who actually fits this blueprint? If the system has to adapt, we need to know who can fit the strict morphological shapes of Iraola's tactics. Out of possession, he usually sets up in a base 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3. But in possession, step 2 kicks in. The double pivot drops deep, which allows the fullbacks to absolutely bomb forward. Then step 3 is the final morphological shift. They create this aggressive 3-2-5 attacking shape. The wingers invert into the half spaces, and the number 10 acts as the primary creative hub to pick those defensive locks. So, looking at the squad, who fits this mold? Well, Dominik Szoboszlai is tailor-made for it. He is the ultimate pressing monster. Then you have Milos Kerkez, a former Bournemouth player who actually played under Iraola, so he's totally fluent in the system's demands at left back. The $60 million signing, Jeremy Jacquet, gives them that massive recovery pace needed right next to Van Dijk. Then there's Florian Wirtz, who operates perfectly as a deep-dropping playmaker, drawing out opposition center-backs to create space. And finally, Hugo Ekitike has the exact physical and technical profile to step right into that critical number 10 role, acting as the dynamic hub linking the midfield and the attack in really tight spaces. Next up is phase 5, tactical and physical risks, because we have to talk about the toll of heavy metal. We really need to address the blunt realities here. Coaches, you know better than anyone that heavy metal football requires a massive, massive physical toll. There are profound risks when you transplant a system from a mid-table club to a European giant. Just contrast these two environments. The Bournemouth reality allowed Iraola to push a smaller squad to their absolute physical limits, largely because they didn't have midweek European football draining their legs. But the Liverpool reality? That's a grueling 60-game season across multiple elite competitions, carrying the massive expectation that you will proactively dominate every single week. And honestly, this brings us to a major red flag regarding player load. Antoine Semenyo recently revealed this about his time playing under Iraola, saying, "Literally for 2 or 3 months, we did not have a day off, even on Sundays." Now, for a team playing twice a week in the Champions League, that kind of training methodology is a fast track to a catastrophic injury crisis. Iraola urgently needs to learn how to manage training load and properly rotate a much larger squad. And beyond just the fitness aspect, there are glaring tactical vulnerabilities. Liverpool has an aging defense that's now going to be asked to hold a pretty perilous high line. Plus, there are huge questions about whether Alexis McAllister has the athletic profile to cover the vast ground the system demands at the pivot. Furthermore, they somehow have to replace the explosive transitional width of Mohamed Salah, which likely means relying on huge money targets like Yan Diomande or Bradley Barcola. And, let's not forget, all of this comes right after FSG already spent $450 million in a previous failed rebuild. That is an enormous financial risk hanging right over the club.
Which brings us to our final phase. Phase 6, the tactical verdict. Can he survive Anfield?
Ultimately, can this architect of organized chaos actually survive the pressure cooker of Anfield? Well, to predict Iraola's future, I think we have to look at Liverpool's past. Remember when Jurgen Klopp first arrived? He was purely a heavy metal coach, but he had to undergo what we call the club evolution. He realized that to actually win Premier League titles, he had to merge his relentless Dortmund-style gegenpressing with Guardiola-esque patient positional play. He literally had to learn how to break down the low block. Iraola must orchestrate this exact same evolution if he wants to survive here. So we leave you with this final thought. Can the underdog mastermind evolve his tactics to become the super club strategist? Or will the sheer physical and tactical demands of this heavy metal reboot simply break the machine? When you think about the spatial dynamics, the training loads, and the personnel we've just covered, it's a massive gamble. Let me know your own tactical analysis down below. Thanks for joining this explainer, and keep studying the game.